Good morning, girlfriends. I have so many things going around in my mind lately, and do you ever find that there's just some nights or some mornings that you dream and you dream and you dream, and it's just nonstop, and there's times that you just think, oh, can I just sleep through the whole night and not dream of anything at all? I don't know if any of you are experiencing that, but I can tell you that I am. Anyways, God had given me a dream in the early hours, if you will, Saturday morning, and he spoke the words, and which is the title of my message, and it's called A Setup for Failure. That came to me yesterday afternoon, actually. I was with a friend and we were at the gas station, and I just heard the words, it's a setup for failure. And I knew in the spirit that it was connected to the dream. But anyways, so I prayed and I asked God to help me with a message and how to bring it out. And this is when I was led to Nehemiah, starting in chapter 2. And it was a story of when he had prepared to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the wall that was in ruins. And then in chapter 3, Nehemiah, he went around and he had to inspect the wall, and that's what he was seeing, to see what repairs were needed to be done. And a lot of times that's what we have to do, is inspect things, to, as any inspector would do, to say if they were building something, they'd have to look over the land and see what was needed to be done. And Nehemiah had it set up that each of the households, people that lived in the different houses along the way in the towns, there was members of each household would take turns in helping to put the wall back up, section after section, as they went down the road, so to say, in the town. In chapter 4, the enemy, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this name right, Sanballat, that's what we're going to call him anyway, had came along to intimidate Nehemiah and the Jews so that they wouldn't finish rebuilding the wall. And the enemy always has a purpose, to stop us from what God is trying to get us to do, right? So he came along and he was taunting them and intimidating them, saying who did they think that they were building this wall. But Nehemiah and the Jews ignored the enemy, and they just kept working right along until the wall was halfway completed. And that made the enemy furious that they had continued to work along, that he wasn't making no effect from stopping them. And so then the enemy tried to bring in confusion over the people. And so then he came in at all different sides, different angles, trying to distract them, knock them down, so to say, so that they wouldn't finish the wall. Maybe they would get so aggravated that they would just say, oh, it's not worth all this. So, but Nehemiah and the Jews, they stayed close to God, praying to God, and they knew that God was going to protect them, in which he did. So they worked hard. This is in chapter 6. during chapter 6, they worked hard. They worked many hours, night and day and night, taking shifts, taking turns, until the wall was finished. And except for the doors and the gates that had not been yet put on. So at this time, they were so close to having their project, so to say, done, that the enemy then they increased their attacks by using trickery, which was negotiations, so that if they could plead with them and negotiate, that they would maybe stop finishing the wall and putting the last final doors on the gates. But like I said, girlfriends, I know that this word was for somebody today, and I just couldn't get it off my mind for the last couple of days. And isn't it just like the enemy to come in at that with one last attack to try to trip you up and convince you that things are going to be different? Or because he knows God's taken you somewhere else, maybe a higher calling or to a new place, and the enemy wants to try to stop that from happening. And then I was thinking, like, isn't that just like the enemy, the devil? Wasn't that what the serpent said to Adam and Eve in the garden? Did God really say, don't eat of that tree? He's right there to just whisper these little thoughts into our minds and get us to thinking. And then the devil had came to tempt Jesus when he was in the desert, when he was fasting and praying. The enemy comes in to try to stop the plans of what God has. And I remember back about, I'm going to say roughly 13 years ago, I knew I was going to, or on a new journey with the Lord. And what did the enemy do? He sent in my not quite ex-husband at the time back to see if I would take him back. And I remember it just like it was yesterday. I remember I had to put my hand up, and I turned my head because it was hard. But I had to think with my mind, not with my heart, and say, no, no, no more. Have you heard this little saying anytime before, that little foxes will spoil the vine? They can also block your view too. I remember God giving me a dream one time about there was a fox in my way, and it was blocking my view, so to say, from where God was trying to take me. And where God is trying to take you. I had this happen just a few years ago as well. But girlfriends, if that is you today, if that's you that's listening here today, or maybe you might listen tomorrow or even later on today, it doesn't matter. If you feel that this is speaking to your spirit, then you'll know if it's for you. I just have this pulling that I know it is for someone. Sometimes God will give someone a dream or an open vision or whatever pertaining to certain things that are taking place in order to warn a person. Sometimes it might be somebody that we know, and sometimes you don't know who it's for, but you know it's for somebody, and God will press it upon your spirit to try to reach out to that person, whoever it may be. And that's why we do videos. It's for their protection, because God knows that something is going to happen. And that's why he uses people to reach out and try to get that message across. So that's what I'm doing today. Sometimes God will use several people to help a person get through a certain situation. God speaks through people, vessels. We're his vessels that he uses. So if we make choices without consulting God first, it can be to our demise. And believe me, girlfriends, I've done that. I admit that. I have done that without seeking God first. And it ended up in disaster, I have to tell you. But like Nehemiah, he consulted God and they were protected. We need to remember that God is also our provider. He's our protection, and he uses people. Yes, he does. And he sends them in for that support, that guidance, that direction, that confirmation. So don't fall for the enemy's tricks that it's going to be better this time. He's only setting a trap so that you will fail even at the last second before you've crossed over into that new thing that God has for you. And even last night, God gave me, or was speaking in through my dreaming. I was hearing his voice, and he was speaking even a little bit more to tell you. It's like, I don't know who's my age or whatever, but I remember the game show. Maybe you will too. It was called Let's Make a Deal. And I can't think of his name right off the top of my head, what his name was, who did the game show. But there is no making a deal with the devil. There's no making a deal. So remember that when the enemy came back at the very last second, before the door had been put on the wall, he was trying to stop that door, that last thing to be done. So that still gave him access to get in. And this is what God was reminding me. Your walls may be put up all around. You've been doing work in your heart. You've been getting things done. You've been working hard day and night, night and day, with dealing with maybe past things, past hurts, past whatever it is. But you have not yet put the door on your heart. The door has to be put on so it can be closed shut, if you get what I'm saying. We can't sometimes think with our heart, because our heart may still be in a tender place. We have to think with our head. So unless the door is closed to the past things, and in the spirit, I heard in the night the words being saying that the door needs to be shut. There's papers that need to be put in place. There are loose ends that need to be tied up. So there's still, the door needs to be closed, papers need to be put in place. These are the loose ends that need to be done before anything else, before you're ready, truly ready to move on to the next thing that God has for you. Action must be taken so that everything is put in place in order so that the enemy can't come in and attack again. This message was sent from God, and if you listen and hear what he's saying, I pray that your heart is prepared, your ears are open to hear what the Spirit would say, that you will succeed. And God says you will succeed if you listen and hear what he's saying. So stay put and put those loose ends in place, get them done up. And if this message is for you, you'll know. And I just pray to God that you hear what God is saying to you and that you will get those last things done before you make any moves. And I just want to share this little thing with you before I close. I was just got off the phone. Well, actually, I was just texting with my oldest daughter who lives in Toronto, and she too is going through something where they knew that the whole street, the city wants to buy all these old houses that are on this one street, and her home happens to be one of those. So she was sharing with me today that there's a few papers that have to be signed. There's some things that have to be dealt with, some paperwork first, and things will be tidied up in order so that they can go on to the new home that I believe God's already opening or showing them where they're going to go. But as paperwork gets finished up first and doors are closed to the old, then the new is being opened up. And I just wanted to share that with you because I thought, well, that goes right along with what God is showing me for you. So I just want you to be encouraged that God's taking care of you and he'll never leave you as long as we listen and we do pray to him to get everything in order. When everything is in the right places, then you'll know when the right time is to move on. So I just pray that this word is an encouragement and it speaks to somebody out there this morning. I just pray blessings and favor over your day in Jesus' name.